Well, we've made it, folks. West Virginia basketball's regular season finale in Morgantown on a Friday night to host the UCF Knights, a team that they've met before, a team they had a comeback victory against not too long ago. But West Virginia, after coming off that disappointing loss against Kansas State on the road, is there really a whole lot to play for left? Is there something still to play for? Really? Really? We're going to talk about it here on this episode of Mountaineer Moment. This is the Mountaineer Moment, your source for all things West Virginia football and basketball. From pregame to postgame coverage and breaking news, we've got you covered. Let's go. Welcome into another episode of Mountaineer Moment, everyone. My name is Troy, and this is episode 160. Mountaineer Moment, your source for all things West Virginia football and basketball. We would love for you to hit that subscribe button. We just eclipsed 500 subscribers on YouTube. Thank you so much, everybody. I gave a little challenge at the end of the last episode, or maybe the beginning, I don't remember. But it worked, and we got a handful of subscribers from that last video, so now we're on to 600 and then some. So keep hitting that subscribe button for us. We would greatly appreciate that. Help me help you, because you'll be in the know and we have new content coming your way. And this is our final regular season preview for a Mountaineer basketball game. Hard to believe, but we have previewed every single West Virginia Mountaineers men's basketball game for the 2025-2026 season. We've also recapped and reacted to every single Mountaineer basketball game this season, and so there'll be one coming Friday night after this game goes final in Morgantown. But this is a final one here in the regular season. We don't know who we're going to play next in Kansas City and beyond, or if there's going to be a beyond for the Mountaineers. But here we are against a UCF opponent that is safely in the NCAA tournament. The last time these two teams met, West Virginia gets the comeback victory, and they insert themselves more so into the bubble conversation. UCF was on the bubble at the time. UCF, though, they're 20-9 overall, 9-8 in conference play, and so they're hoping a win would cement them as a season above 500 in Big 12 play. A loss, obviously, would put them at 9-9, which is exactly where West Virginia would be. So, like conference standings and record-wise, West Virginia has an opportunity to finish 500 in the conference. We'll talk about that in this episode and what that means. We'll talk about this is just an opportunity to gear up for next week in Kansas City, where you have quad one opportunities on quad one opportunities should you win. Easier said than done, as we know, for this Mountaineer basketball team. But we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about the Big 12 bubble. A little different than what we've normally done, because West Virginia has played themselves out of that conversation in a lot of ways, as we know. But we'll talk about big picture bubble looking, and how's it looking in the Big 12, who needs to do what in Kansas City, and so on and so forth. So we'll finish the conversation there. But hit that subscribe button for us. Again, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music. Let's grow this Mountaineer Moment community. So we want to start just looking at both teams a little bit, 30,000-foot view of how we've gotten here, right? These two teams last met on February 14th, so not even a month ago, obviously between games, just a couple of weeks, when Mountaineers came back from down 14 in that comeback victory against the Knights down in Orlando. West Virginia scored 46 points in the second half. A lot of that coming over the last 10, 11, 12 minutes to rally and get the win, 74-67 the final. It was a one-point game at halftime. UCF dominated the first half of the second half, and then West Virginia dominated the second half of the second half to get that victory. At the time, Mountaineers improved to 16-9 and 7-5 overall in Big 12 conference play. And then they had a leg up on UCF at that point, who fell to 6-6. And so now things have turned around a little bit. That's what happens in Big 12 basketball when you lose 4 out of 5, as the Mountaineers have. Utah, Oklahoma State, or Utah, then TCU, then Oklahoma State, and then you beat BYU, a ranked team, build your resume a little bit, get back into the conversation. You know the deal. Then the Mountaineers hit the road for their last time in a true road game this season and fell at Kansas State. And that's where we're at right now. Mountaineers, again, currently sitting at 17-13 and 8-9 in conference play. Since these two teams have met, obviously UCF has done a little bit more winning than the Mountaineers have. Rather than losing 4 out of 5, they've won 3 out of 5. And right there, just in that stretch, that's the difference between a team who is very much on the outside looking in at the NCAA tournament and a team that looks to be safely in the field with their 20 wins and a guarantee of at least 500 record in Big 12 play. But since these two teams have met, UCF knocked off TCU by 11, knocked off Utah by 2, beat BYU 97-84 on the road, and then they fell narrowly to Baylor and fell in a high-scoring game against Oklahoma State at home. Their last 2 games have been at home, and those have been 2 losses. Now they're hitting the road again, where they have won their last 2 games, Utah and BYU, and they've been on the road. So this UCF team, they were in a better seed, better spot, NCAA tournament picture-wise just about a week ago. But 2 consecutive losses. And, it's funny because that reminds me of something we talked about. Was it this team? Yeah, it was UCF. They've kind of just been a rhythm team in the sense that they win 1, then they lose 1, then they win 2, then they lose 2. We talked about that theme last time. So it's just because I think it's kind of crazy. They started conference play with a win, and then they lost 1. Then they won 2, then they lost 2. Then they won 3, then they lost 3. Then they won 3 again, so they didn't get to 4, but they won 3 in a row after the West Virginia loss, and now they've lost 2 in a row. And so they can finish out there if West Virginia does what they need to do and wins this game. UCF can finish their Big 12 season in just a continual back and forth to get to that 500 record. A win, a loss, 2 wins, 2 losses, 3 wins, 3 losses, 3 wins, and they got 2 losses right now. West Virginia looks to make it a third, just as they did last time. Last time these 2 teams met, UCF was coming off back-to-back losses before West Virginia knocked them off and gave them 3 straight L's. So that's kind of an interesting kind of point. But again, they've done enough work. They only have 9 losses on the season, and they're going to finish at least 500 in conference, barring what happens on Friday night in Morgantown. Just another reminder, the game is on Friday night. In case you were wondering, the game is on Friday night. So don't miss it. CBS Sports Network, 8 o'clock Eastern between the Mountaineers and the Knights for the grand season finale for the Mountaineers at Hope Coliseum. But yeah, that's how these 2 teams have arrived here. We'll talk more bubble and seed lines and things like that toward the end of the episode. But for West Virginia, what this game is an opportunity to do, right? Facts are facts, regardless of your opinion or your take on Ross Hodge and what this team has done and the bad losses that they've had. All of that aside, which, maybe has its rightful place in a conversation. Certainly the losses. I don't know too much about Coach Hodge being getting so much blame for that. But the facts are the facts. And right now, as you sit on March 5th, going into March 6th, for the regular season finale, you are 8-9 in conference play with 1 game to go, meaning you have an opportunity to get to 500. That's what this is. This is an opportunity to finish the season 500. You finished the season 500 in conference last year. All of us here thought you were poised to make the NCAA tournament. You did not. You were a snub, one of the greatest snubs ever. We get it. This team, however, won't be in position to make the tournament with a win in the regular season finale against UCF, giving another quad one win, giving them a sweep over UCF and Cincinnati, wins over BYU, wins over Kansas, right? We know the story, but it's not enough because of, what you did in the non-conference. We've talked about that all season long. Some of those losses are going to come back to bite you, and they have. Close loss to Clemson, close loss to Ohio State, double overtime loss to Ohio State, loss to Xavier, and lost to Wake Forest in a neutral site game, all of those. And then look at the Big 12 standings right now. Look at the very bottom, right? Do yourself a favor, pull up the Big 12 standings. Look at the bottom of those standings. The bottom 3, 14, 15, 16 in this order is Baylor, Kansas State, and Utah. All 3 of those teams have one thing in common, at least one thing. I haven't done a lot of research on those 3 teams, but I know one thing they do have in common, and that's that they beat West Virginia Mountaineers. So that tells it all, right? If you get, again, getting super hypothetical, super what if, but if you got one of those, you'd be in a lot better position. If you got 2 of those, you'd be in a heck of a lot better position. And if you got all 3 of those, you'd be going dancing, right? Because you'd be at 11 wins with 1 to go. But you didn't. You lost to Baylor at home. You lost to Utah at home, right, after coming off of this high of beating UCF. And then you lost to K-State on the road without their best player and with an interim head coach. And so as we, again, sit here on the eve of, depending on when you're watching this, the eve of the regular season finale in Morgantown at the Hope Coliseum, this still remains a fact. You have an opportunity to get to 500. Sure, your bad losses have successfully played you out of tournament contention, barring a miracle run in Kansas City. I guess you could say stranger things have happened. But here you are. It's an opportunity to get to 500. It's an opportunity to finish, potentially in the top half of the Big 12 standings. Cincinnati is 9-8. They got one more game to go. Obviously, you have the leg up on them. BYU is 8-9. You have a leg up on them. Should it be, one-on-one tiebreaker there? UCF, you'd have a leg up on if you beat them. Obviously, if they beat you, they finish ahead of you in the standings outright. And then TCU, you can't catch them because they're 10-7. So here's the deal. This game, because of the circumstances West Virginia has played themselves into, because you've lost the teams that are bad, because you've lost the teams you should have beaten, what this game really means, if you can make an argument that they're playing for something, well, they're going to have to be playing a lot of games in Kansas City for this game to matter. And we feel like we've said this a few times toward the end of the stretch of the season. It starts with this one. You got to get this one. Well, again, if you get this one, we don't know what the bracket's fully going to look like in Kansas City, but whether you play in the first round or the second round, as we start to roll some numbers in our head, a win against UCF would get you to 18 wins on the season. I mean, there's so many ways it could go. But you have an opening round game, you win that one, you get to 19, you play against like a TCU in the second round who's coming off a bye, you beat them, then you play like in Arizona in the third round, you beat them somehow, miracle, right? Then you get to 21, then somehow you get to 22, right? Like, it's crazy uphill battle, but a lot can happen in a week, and I'm not sitting here predicting nothing. I don't think the team's going to go to the championship in the Big 12 tournament. I do not think that. But I the latest argument you're seeing on Twitter or X and everything is like, well, what does this team really need? And I'm just like, stop, because you've played yourself out. And sure, maybe you'll get a look if you don't win the Big 12 tournament, but you win 3 or 4 games to get there, not including win against UCF, which would put you at 18. You add 3 or 4 to that win column, you got 21 or 22. Then, yeah, sure. It's a lot more quad 1 wins, yeah, sure. But, I don't think you're going to do that. I'd love to eat those words. I'd love to be wrong, but I don't think you're going to do that. However, as you gear up for Kansas City, as you gear up for a game, gear up for what you're hoping to be several games in the Big 12 tournament, you gotta fix some things, and it's hard to think that a team can fix some things in early March, but obviously it goes without saying, you don't fix offensive issues. You can't score against Kansas State for drought after drought if you don't fix some things, and they're probably not, right, because it's March again, then you're going home early. Realistically, I mean, you have to win several games in Kansas City that you wouldn't be favored in. You might be favored in the opening round. You depending on the matchup in the second round, you could be. But it'd probably be a toss up unless you're playing. If you play in the opening round, you'd be favored probably against like Utah or whoever, although they've beaten you. But then as you advance, quarterfinals, semifinals, final, you're playing the big dogs probably, and those big dogs are going to be favored to beat you bad. But you got to use this as an opportunity to gear up, to get ready for what you're hoping to be a very long run, a very long stay in Middle America, Kansas City. So we shall see, and we can certainly hope for that. I wanted to end the episode talking just Big 12 bubble-wise. Obviously that we know the top teams in the Big 12 and their potential to make a long run in March and into early April and look to get to the Final Four. Arizona has high hopes of doing that. Houston has high hopes of doing that. Iowa State has high hopes of doing that. Texas Tech, with the loss of JT Toppin, obviously hurts them, but they've played well considering he's been out except for that loss against TCU. Kansas, Darren Peterson, that's a kind of interesting situation, but he's one of the best players in the country. Bill Self, great coach. They certainly have aspirations to go deep. TCU has played themselves into the tournament, 20 wins. UCF, 20 wins. BYU, 20 wins. And then the bubble conversation, and it makes sense as you inch closer towards Selection Sunday, the bubble conversation relating to Big 12 teams has dwindled. You think of Baylor, who Joe Lunardi was holding on to for a very long time. Well, they've won 5 conference games. They're 15-15, right? They're going to have to win the Big 12 tournament. Arizona State, 16-14, 7-10 in conference. They've recently kind of just putting their name on the map, but it's a little too late. It's amazing. Colorado, 17-13. They're 7-10 in conference, so they have the same exact overall record as West Virginia, just a game back in the standings from West Virginia, a team that they've beaten. So should West Virginia fall to 8-10 and Colorado get to 8-10, West Virginia would have the tie break there. But Arizona, Houston, Texas Tech, Iowa State, Kansas, TCU, UCF, and BYU, locks for the NCAA tournament. The trending team upward because of what they've done over the course of February and early March is Cincinnati, who's 17-13 and 9-8 in conference play, and so they could get to 10-8. Who did they forget who they play? They play TCU to close out the regular season, so that'll be an interesting one on Saturday afternoon. Something game to keep an eye on. But obviously, a Big 12 team hasn't missed the tournament with an over 500 record, and Cincinnati would have an opportunity to do that. I think they're obviously, regardless of what they do to end the regular season, they're a team that needs to do some things in Kansas City. You could obviously make the argument that at this point in time, barring that we don't know what happens on Friday or Saturday for West Virginia or the Bearcats, at this point in time, Cincinnati, although they've lost 2 to West Virginia, they're closer toward the field than the Mountaineers are and might have a little less work to do in Kansas City. Just saying. Obviously very possible both teams would be on the outside looking in at the NCAA tournament. But it wasn't long ago when we had maybe only 6 locks in the Big 12. And, now you add UCF and TCU into that conversation. And all of a sudden, you have 8 locks, 8 teams that are in the tournament. And, teams that are on the outside looking in, but they're not bubble, right? West Virginia's on the outside looking in, but they're looking from a ways away. Cincinnati still looking from a ways away. And that's it. There's not really a bubble team, a double bubble team, whatever you want to say to emphasize that point. There's not a lot of bubble going on in the Big 12, and there once was. But some teams, it's as simple as this. Down the stretch of this regular season, some teams played themselves in, and some teams played themselves out. And the teams that have played themselves in include TCU and UCF. And teams that have played them, no one has played themselves out of this thing. And I'm just kind of making real-time sense of this in my head. No team has played themselves out of the tournament like West Virginia has. You can make the argument for Oklahoma State, who was, kind of there too, and they still have aspirations, but they're 6-11 in Big 12. But yeah, man, that's sad. That's a sad reality to face. And come next week when we're watching the Big 12 tournament on that crazy-looking glass floor, I'm curious what I'm guessing it'll be. Why can't I think of his name? I can see his face. I can't think of his name. It's just gone. The announcer. It's so gone. That's so funny. But he'll be there. You know who I'm talking about. And I'm curious what the narrative is going to be in Kansas City, because a lot of times conference tournament, you talk about bubble, you talk about teams and what they need. Well, the tournament, as far as who's getting in for the Big 12, is pretty solidified, in my opinion, and I think on most opinions. There's teams with 20 wins. There's 3 teams in this conference with the exact number, 20 wins, and I think they're safe. And there's teams that are below that, like Cincinnati and West Virginia, Colorado, Arizona State, Oklahoma State, 17, 18 wins that are not there. Fran Fraschilla, that's who I was thinking of. There it is, Fran Fraschilla. He'll be there, hyping up the Big 12, hyping up the Mountaineers and everybody, but there's not like a crazy narrative going into Kansas City. Some teams are in, some teams are out. And West Virginia is one of those teams that needs a pretty crazy run. Maybe not as crazy as like someone who absolutely positively has to win the conference tournament. West Virginia's got to go on a crazy long run, and I'd be shocked if they're capable of doing so, right? I'm not wrong for saying that. So, again, this is Mountaineer Moment, episode 160, game preview, West Virginia and UCF, with a little bubble talk on the side. Be sure to join us post-game, not live, but post-game, hour or two after the game goes final. On Friday night in Morgantown, we'll have you covered with a game recap, and then we'll jump on, certainly, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, talking Big 12 tournament from a West Virginia perspective, maybe a little bit of talk just broadly speaking for the Big 12 after that tournament field is set and seeds are aligned and we see the path for everybody. We'll certainly have you covered with lots of content coming next week and this weekend, so hit that subscribe button again and be in the know, and we have all sorts of new content coming. March is here, and Mountaineer Moment is here to stay. Continue to join us, and we'll see you next time. Let's go Mountaineers.